Now, let's come to Abigail. When we talk about cancer, some people say it's just a death sentence. There's no remedy, and the stigma too. I've seen some people driven into, the background and hiding themselves. What made the difference for you? What's your experience?
Okay, first of all, my mother blazed the trail in that my mother had terminal cancer 4 times. 4 times the doctors gathered us together to say that this woman is going to die in 6 months. 4 times the woman said, I ain't going nowhere. My mother said there's no doctor that's going to tell her when she's going to go. She will check out when she's good and ready. So she lived for 33 years after her last terminal diagnosis.
After the last one?
Yes, 33 years. Sadly, I lost her to leukemia 5 months before I was diagnosed with cancer myself. And it was actually quite interesting because I'd had a mammogram. I was very breast aware because my mother had cancer, so I'd go every single year for a mammogram. And I'd done a mammogram, but I had very dense breasts. And something was still niggling me that, go and check this thing. I had a mammogram done here, and I was going to the UK for holiday. So I just said, let me just do another mammogram. And 2 weeks before I traveled, I was standing in front of the mirror and looking at my breasts, and something said, if you had breast cancer, what would you do? I made the decision that day I would take both breasts off. I went off to the UK, went for a mammogram, which I was very used to because I was going yearly, but for some reason I was really, really nervous. I went in, they did the mammogram, and they did enlargement of the mammogram, and the radiographer said, there's something about that right breast, I'm not sure, can we do an ultrasound? We now did the ultrasound. Then she said, oh, I can see some things I'm not sure about. Can we do a biopsy? And immediately did the biopsies on both sides. The following morning I get a phone call from the breast surgeon, not even from the hospital. He introduced himself and said, well, actually, I understand you want to go back to Nigeria. It's my day off, but I need to see you before you go. You can come to my house. And I thought, whoa. If an English doctor is asking you to come to your house, it's not for a cup of tea, I don't think.
Exactly.
So off I went to his house, and he sat me down and says, I have good news and I have bad news. Which do you want first? I said, give me the bad news. He said, the bad news is you have cancer. The good news is we think we got it early. I said, take them off. He was like, oh, but what are you talking about? We can do this. I said, no, take them off. How quickly can we do it? 5 days later, I went in for the double mastectomy. Everything seemed to have gone well. I came out of theater and I was eating my dinner. I cleared everything on the plate because I hadn't eaten for quite a while. Cleared everything on the plate. Next thing we noticed that blood was dripping. And my chest was swelling and blood was dripping on my sheets. And we're like, uh-oh, something seems to have gone. Maybe a blood vessel has undone or something. Went back into theater. That's with a plate, with a whole tray full of food in my belly. Went back into theater. Came back out and I couldn't breathe. They discovered my lungs had collapsed. I needed a blood transfusion. And as I was in and out of consciousness, I remember I had what I can only say was like a bit like a vision-y kind of thing. And I was walking through a tunnel and it was blood everywhere. And they're like little, computer game demons. They're like jumping around everywhere. Then suddenly it started raining, like really bright rain. And as it was dropping, the blood was clearing. And I found myself standing by a stream. And what came to mind was Psalm 23. Although you walk through the valley of shadow of death, he leads me by still waters. I knew I was going to be fine. My recovery was very, 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 very fast. The doctors were shocked at the speed of recovery. Because I understood now I had a purpose. I stayed away from negativity. When my family had got the diagnosis, 1 or 2 family members were crying quite a lot. And I would say, look, please, if you're going to go and cry, finish crying before you come back to me. Because you need to remain positive. If you're fighting cancer, you cannot be angry at people. Anger is like poison. It eats away at your soul. You have to surround yourself with happiness because happiness is medically proven to produce endorphins. And endorphins are healing hormones. So if you surround yourself with happiness and positivity, then you can fight the battle. If you're carrying so much bitterness, your hands aren't free to fight. So it's so important that we're really, really positive. When I got back to Nigeria, we decided, let's have a look and see what is the road of a cancer patient in Nigeria. We went around a couple of the teaching hospitals. We were depressed. We said, wow, people are ashamed. Why should anybody be ashamed of something they didn't cause for themselves? Even if they caused it, why should you be ashamed? People say, oh, we want volunteers to come and speak. If I come out and speak, what happens if my boss is here and they won't send me on training because they assume I'm going to die? If you're going to screen me, you do mass screening. Who's going to pay for my treatment when you tell me I have cancer? So these are some of the challenges that we found. and we found it necessary to put together a support structure for people who are suffering from cancer. The truth will set you free. My people perish for lack of knowledge. You have to have information. Why is there stigma? Stigma comes because of fear and ignorance. We have to show that cancer can be treated. In my mother's case, it was terminal, but she lived, so it shows the power of positive thinking, the power of believing you can overcome. And we've been able to help women by giving free prosthesis, by giving out mastectomy stuff. We assist with food from a food bank. So it's so important that you look at holistically at the whole patient.
It's really
important. Yes, of course.